For your YouTubes, we've had a bit of a problem. Take a seat. You see, what pretty much started this whole affair was a snapped glow plug. And even though maybe I could have got a specialist to get it out, I figured at the time this is going to be a fun challenge to take the engine out, to take the head off, maybe do a bit of rebuilding, really recondition the engine so it'll last another 130,000 miles. So keep all that in mind because we'll come back to that later. Story time. Around about the mid-2000s, Peugeot, Ford, BMW, a few manufacturers kind of came together to produce a common diesel engine. Big car, I think you should do a story on this. I'd watch it. I've seen it referred to as the PSA engine, or the DV6. But essentially, it was a way of collaborating on a cheaper diesel engine. And as luck would have it, at the end of that decade was a particularly bad time for a lot of businesses, car manufacturers, my own business, Formula One teams, Woolworths, gutted. So to have a diesel engine that they've all chipped into makes sense, right? And diesel was the thing at that time. Yes, it was dirty, but the range was better, so it must be better for the environment, right? And you sat there scratching your head thinking, yes, there's extra range with diesel, but this stuff's nasty. Are we quite sure about this? Is it something I don't know? In hindsight, not the greatest idea, but they had the best of intentions. There was a lot of progress made in the diesel technology world at that time. Audi at Le Mans, for example. So diesel was in fashion in the late 2000s. Around about the time, a chap called Gordon from Scotland gave me £2,000 for my Audi. Considering I only paid £450 for it, it was a good deal. I miss that Audi. And should it have been scrapped? It's called the scrappage scheme. Not so sure. Anyway, so I got a Fiesta with a diesel engine. The company I worked for at the time had an employee incentive program to buy more economical cars. In this case, a lot of diesels. More economical, better for the environment. Diesel, I know, but just work with me for a moment. So why am I telling you the story? Well, back to the problem. A glow plug is kind of responsible for kicking this all off. And during the height of lockdowns, didn't really need two cars. We didn't need any cars, to be honest. And then suddenly we needed two cars like yesterday. And then the Zoe came along, but that's another story. But for now, the engine is in bits. We've taken off the head. We'll be able to get that glow plug out, right? Yeah, no problem. Sure. Okay. So back to the head. When I tried to get the glow plug out, I was spending a lot of time spraying all sorts down the bore, trying to pull it out with pliers, trying to drill it out, making a bit of a hash of it, redoing the threads, making more of a hash of it, redoing the threads again, hitting it with the hammer, redoing the threads again. This was a nightmare. I drilled from the other side. I drilled as carefully as I could, up the glow plug instead. Still no joy. So I was having a bit of a guts full of this. I had it in the living room for several days. I promised it would only be in there for one, maybe two tops. Actually, I think it was in there for about 2 weeks on the living room table, so it was not popular. And I'd had enough. So I gave in. Took it down to an engineering shop, and the guy looked at it and he said, well, I could drill this out, but the amount of time it's going to take to get the head at the right angle so I can drill carefully at the right angle, it took a few hours of setup just there. So the guy was trying to give me the best options he could. And by telling me that up front, this was going to be a few £100, I then suggested, well, I have seen on eBay a head for £100. And he said, just get that. A head is being sold on its own, and it's from a Peugeot diesel. What might scupper us is this Peugeot was white, whereas my Fiesta was blue. Yeah. According to my partner, that's the main differentiator between cars. What car have you got? A blue one. Oh, I've heard they're quite nice. So yeah, a head from another car, same fuel type, diesel, same amount of cylinders, 4, and same capacity, 1.6. It'll work, right? Which brings me back to the story of the DV6 engine and the collaboration between the manufacturers. Will our Peugeot head fit on our Ford engine? I mean, it'll fit, but will it work? We'll find out. I kind of know it Alright, but for the purposes of YouTube, let's find out. It's exciting, right? So in this part, I'm going to show the old head, how to get all the gubbins out of it, the new head, the lengths I went to get the old plug out, then to give up to get the new head, and to transfer all the bits to the new head. So to take the head off, we need to take off loads of things like the GR valve, which is here. We need to take off the alternator, various brackets. Two bolts. Ah, that's where that bracket goes back. It's quite handy watching these videos back. I'm doing that thing again. I'm putting the screws back in the holes. But if you weren't around for the other videos, do you know why I do that? Because otherwise I will lose them. And if I don't lose them, I'll probably put them in the wrong holes. But if you put them back where they came from, there's no chance of that. Alternator bracket. Fuel pump next. Head is ready to come off. Next, we study the Haynes manual very hard to work out which order the bolts have to be loosened in. Do you remember those dot-to-dot drawings you had as a kid and you got stuck when you were looking for the next number? It's kind of like that. Understandably, these bolts are fairly tight. Doesn't help that the engine is moving around on the floor either. Yes, I know I'm going the wrong way, but it's a little trick I've picked up over the last few years. When bolts seem really tight, sometimes it pays to move them a little bit back and forth, because you don't want to be snapping bolts, especially head bolts. That's going to be quite a bad day if you snap one of them. What also really helps is a few ugga-duggers. Your arms have got more power than something electric like I'm holding, but that rapid shaking about sometimes really helps the bolts. Yep, this guy. That's the reason this had to come off in the first place.
I don't particularly want to relive the saga of getting that glow plug out, but I think in future I will have another bash because, after all, that head was good. What I did at the time was, as you can see, I got a replacement head to save time. Lol. Which meant doing loads more cleaning, yet again. It's probably worth mentioning at this point the system I had to keep all the valves and springs and collets together where they were meant to be. It's one of the few successes of this project. So here's a diagram of all the valves in the head. It most certainly isn't a flower pot drawn by one of the kids. Why would you even think that? So my system comprised of a load of Ziploc catering bags from Costco and a numbering system, which worked a treat. So let's talk about valve stem guides. These are consumable parts, they're made of rubber and they seal the valve, and over time they degrade because they're rubber. And when that happens, you start to get oil in the combustion chamber and you tend to get blue smoke. So 4 valves per cylinder, and on this cylinder the last valve guide is going in. A few careful taps and in it goes. I didn't show taking the old ones out, but trust me, you're going to need a tool set like this. It's for taking old ones out and putting new ones back in again. So this is the final bit of the new head rebuild. I've cleaned it all up, and now the valves and springs and all the rest of the gubbins are going back in. There's a few top tips for this job. One of them is a magnetic tray. Those collets, 16 sets, 2 each, 32 of them. You lose any of them and you're utterly screwed. Here is the valve spring compressor tool. It's just a generic cheap one off Amazon, probably. And there's a bit of cardboard underneath so I don't scratch the cylinder head surface. This new head's original valves are going back in. It's just the rockers that will come from the old head because they obviously push up against the camshaft. So these collets are the interface between the spring washer and the valve. There's a couple of grooves cut into the valve where the collets can fit snugly on. Trouble is, you haven't really got a lot of room to work with, so my solution was a straw and some grease, which kind of nicely holds the collets. And as long as they're in the right orientation and you can just push them on, with a bit of luck, they stay on. And there's 2 of them, so once I've got the first one on, I kind of push it round the valve to the other side and then get the second one on, and the whole process takes forever. And if you lose one, which I have done there, you take a little magnet and you pluck it out and you try again. And if you're lucky, you end up with the 2 collets nicely in, like so. Sometimes you release the tension on the spring and they clearly don't sit right, so you need to do it again. But in this case, we're all good, so we unwind the spring and take the tool off carefully, and that's one valve done. So do that 16 times in total, and you have a rebuilt cylinder head. So I'm going to wrap up for now, and we're going to see in the next part the head go back on. Cheers for now.